Welcome. Before we continue with this incredible true story, tell us in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support our channel. We're growing every day, and we sincerely appreciate you being part of our community. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Tom Sullivan wiped down the counter for the third time that hour. At 52, he had been working the night shift at Patterson's Market for 8 months now. It was quiet work, exactly what he needed after everything that had happened before. The job was simple: restock shelves, help the occasional late-night customer, and keep the place running until morning. Tom moved with deliberate precision, his gray hair tucked under a faded baseball cap, his movements economical and purposeful. To anyone watching, he appeared to be just another middle-aged man trying to make ends meet. His colleagues knew him as polite but distant, someone who did his job well, but didn't share much about his past. The store sat on the corner of Maple and 3rd Street, in a neighborhood that had seen better days. During the day, it bustled with regular customers, families, workers grabbing coffee, students from the nearby community college. But at night, it became a different place. The harsh fluorescent lighting created deep shadows between the aisles, and the constant hum of refrigeration units was the only sound breaking the silence. Tom had developed a routine over the months: check the doors and windows every hour, monitor the parking lot through the security mirrors, keep the register drawer slightly open so any would-be thief could see there wasn't much cash inside. He understood the vulnerabilities of working alone at night, but something about his calm demeanor and situational awareness had kept trouble at bay. Until tonight. Marcus checked his watch. 12:47 a.m. Perfect timing. The last customer had left 20 minutes ago. An employee was now in the back restocking the cooler section. Through the large front windows, they could see him moving methodically between the shelves, completely unaware of the 3 figures crouched behind the parked cars outside. Remember the plan? Marcus whispered to his partners. Jake, you watch the door. Tony, you handle the register. I'll deal with the employee. In and out, 2 minutes max. The 3 men pulled their masks down and checked their weapons. Marcus carried a .38 revolver, Jake had a knife, and Tony gripped a baseball bat. They had chosen weapons that would intimidate without being overly violent. They wanted compliance, not casualties. They moved across the empty parking lot like shadows, their footsteps muffled by the soft asphalt. The automatic door sensor triggered as they approached, and the familiar chime echoed through the store. Marcus felt his heart rate increase as they stepped inside. The employee was still in the back, apparently oblivious to their entry. This was exactly what they had hoped for. Complete surprise, total control of the situation. "Excuse me," Marcus called out, his voice artificially friendly. "We need some help over here." Tom Sullivan turned slowly from the refrigerated section where he had been organizing energy drinks. His movements were unhurried, almost casual, as if 3 masked figures entering a store at nearly 1 a.m. was the most natural thing in the world. "Good evening, gentlemen," Tom said, his voice steady and calm. "How can I help you?" The response caught Marcus off guard. Most people would have shown fear, panic, or at least surprise. But this man's tone was conversational, almost professional. There was something in his eyes, not fear, but assessment. He was looking at them the way a doctor might examine patients, cataloging details and making calculations. "This is a robbery," Marcus announced, raising his gun. "Nobody has to get hurt if you just do what we say." Tom nodded slowly, as if considering a reasonable request. "I understand. Would you like me to open the register for you?" Jake and Tony exchanged glances. This was going smoother than they had expected. The employee was being cooperative, maybe even helpful. Marcus felt a surge of confidence. "Yeah, that's right. Just open it up and step back." Tom moved toward the counter with the same deliberate pace he had maintained throughout the interaction. But as he walked, something subtle changed in his posture. His shoulders set differently, his head tilted slightly, and his eyes began moving in a pattern that none of the 3 robbers recognized, a systematic scanning that took in distances, angles, and potential weapons. What Marcus, Jake, and Tony didn't know was that Tom Sullivan had spent 12 years as a Marine, with 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. He had been a combat engineer, specializing in explosive ordnance disposal and urban warfare tactics. His last assignment had been training military police in close-quarters combat and threat assessment. The quiet night shift worker they thought they were robbing was actually a man who had faced down insurgents in Fallujah, who had defused IEDs under fire, and who had earned 2 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star for valor. Tom had left the military not because he couldn't handle the stress, but because he had seen enough violence to last several lifetimes that as Tom reached a register, he made his assessment. 3 targets, weapons drawn but not professionally held. The leader with the gun was standing too close to his partners, creating a clustering that would work against them. The man with the knife was positioned where he could be easily flanked. The one with the bat was nervous, shifting his weight in a way that telegraphed his next moves. The register takes a moment to open, Tom said conversationally. It's an older model. He pressed a few buttons, and the machine began its slow mechanical process. During those few seconds, Tom made his decision.
Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thumbs up, you can help more people hear this story by liking this video. Bell, every week we share unforgettable stories of silent heroes.
These weren't hardened criminals. They were probably desperate, possibly first-timers. He could end this without anyone getting seriously hurt. There we go, Tom said as the register drawer began to slide open. Should be about $200 in there. Marcus stepped forward, eager to grab the money. That was his first mistake. That Tom's hand shot out with lightning speed, grabbing Marcus's wrist and twisting in a motion that forced him to drop the gun. Before Marcus could react, Tom's other hand struck a pressure point on his neck, dropping him to his knees. Jake lunged forward with his knife, but Tom was already moving. He grabbed a can of soup from a nearby display and threw it with precision, striking Jake in the solar plexus and doubling him over. In the same motion, Tom vaulted over the counter with the fluid grace of someone half his age. Tony swung his bat in a wide arc, but Tom ducked under it and swept Tony's legs, sending him crashing into a display of potato chips. The entire encounter lasted less than 30 seconds. When the dust settled, Marcus was face down on the floor with his hands zip-tied behind his back. Tom had used the plastic ties from the produce section. Jake was sitting against the wall, gasping for breath and nursing bruised ribs. Tony was tangled in a collapsed chip display, his bat on the other side of the store. Tom stood in the center of the aftermath, not even breathing heavily. He picked up the phone and dialed 911 with the same casual demeanor he had maintained throughout the encounter. "This is Patterson's Market on Maple Street," he said into the phone. "I need police response for an attempted robbery. 3 suspects detained, no injuries requiring medical attention." As he spoke, Tom began cleaning up the store with one hand, while holding the phone with the other. He straightened the chip display, picked up scattered merchandise, and even wiped down the counter where Marcus had fallen. The 3 would-be robbers lay there in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. They had expected an easy target, a frightened employee who would hand over the money without resistance. Instead, they had encountered something none of them had prepared for, a professional who had dealt with real danger and real violence in places much more dangerous than a convenience store. When the police arrived 8 minutes later, they found a scene that defied their expectations. The store was nearly organized. The employee was calmly restocking shelves, and 3 suspects were sitting quietly against the wall, looking more embarrassed and defiant. Officer Rodriguez, the first responder, had been to Patterson's Market before. He knew Tom as a polite, quiet man who always had fresh coffee ready and never seemed rattled by the chaos of urban night shift work. "Tom, you okay?" Rodriguez asked, surveying the scene. "Fine, Officer Rodriguez. Just had some visitors who were a bit confused about our store policies." Rodriguez looked at the 3 suspects, then back at Tom. "What exactly happened here?" Tom shrugged. "They asked for the money in the register. I explained that we prefer customers to pay for their merchandise the traditional way. We had a brief discussion about it, and they decided to wait for you to arrive." The understatement was so complete that Rodriguez almost smiled. The evidence told a different story. Overturned displays, a gun secure behind the counter, and 3 men with the look of people who had just learned a very hard lesson. Detective Sarachin arrived 20 minutes later to take statements. She had been investigating a string of convenience store robberies across the city, and the descriptions of the suspects matched perfectly. but the outcome of this attempt was unlike anything in her case files. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, approaching Tom as he continued his restocking, "I need to ask you some questions about what happened here." Tom nodded. "Of course. Though I should mention that I'm not pressing charges if they're willing to reconsider their career choices." Chin raised an eyebrow. "These men threatened you with weapons, sir. This is a serious crime." "Detective, I've been threatened by people with much more dangerous weapons in much more dangerous places. These boys aren't criminals. They're just scared and desperate. Sometimes people need a second chance to make better decisions." As Chin interviewed the suspects, a picture began to emerge. Marcus had lost his job 3 months ago and was facing eviction. Jake was trying to support his sick mother. Tony had gambling debts that were putting his family at risk. They weren't career criminals. They were people who had made a desperate choice born of desperation. The more Chin learned about the incident, the more questions she had about Tom Sullivan. His response to the robbery had been textbook perfect. He had neutralized 3 threats without seriously injuring anyone, secured the scene, and maintained evidence integrity. This wasn't the response of a typical convenience store employee. "Mr. Sullivan," Chin said privately, "can I ask about your background? What you did tonight? That wasn't luck or instinct. That was training." Tom considered her question for a long moment. "I used to work in security," he said finally, "before I took this job." It was technically true, though security hardly covered 12 years of military service in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. Chin sensed there was more to the story, but Tom's demeanor suggested he wasn't inclined to elaborate. The incident made the local news, but the story was brief and focused on a failed robbery rather than the employee's response. Tom had specifically requested that his name not be used, and the reporter respected his privacy. The headline read, "3 arrested in failed convenience store robbery." In the days that followed, Tom returned to his normal routine. He restocked shelves, helped customers, and maintained the same quiet professionalism that had characterized his work from the beginning. The only change was that neighborhood residents began stopping by more frequently, often just to check on him or buy something they didn't really need to Mrs. Patterson, the store owner, visited the next week. She was a kind woman in her 60s who had inherited the business from her father. She had been Tom's reference when he applied for the job, and she had appreciated his reliability and work ethic. "Tom," she said, finding him organized in the magazine rack, "I heard about what happened. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Mrs. Patterson. Just glad nobody got hurt." She studied his face, seeing the same calm competence that had impressed her during his job interview. "The police said you handled it remarkably well. They seemed surprised." Tom smiled slightly. "I've dealt with difficult customers before." Mrs. Patterson nodded, but something in his tone suggested layers of meaning she didn't fully understand. "Well, I want you to know that we're grateful. This store has been in my family for 30 years, and you protected it." "It's just my job, ma'am." But both of them knew it had been much more than that. Word of the incident spread to the neighborhood in a way that stories do in tight-knit communities. The details grew and shifted with each telling, but the core fact remained the same. Tom Sullivan had protected the store and everyone in it with skill that spoke of extensive training and experience. Regular customers began treating him differently, not with fear, but with respect that hadn't been there before. Veterans shopping at the store seemed to recognize something in his bearing, though Tom never explicitly confirmed or denied their suspicions. 3 weeks after the incident, Jake appeared at the store during Tom's shift. He was out on bail and looked nervous as he approached the counter. "Mr. Sullivan," Jake said quietly, "I wanted to apologize and to thank you." Tom looked up from the inventory sheet he was reviewing. "Thank me for what?" "For not hurting us, for not pressing charges. My lawyer says you could have, but you didn't." Tom studied the young man's face. Jake looked different than he had that night. Less desperate, more hopeful. "What are you doing now?" "I got a job at a warehouse. Day shift. It's not much, but it's honest work. And I'm getting help from my mom through some programs I didn't know existed." Tom nodded. "That's good. How are your friends?" "Marcus is working construction. Tony's doing community service and going to counseling for his gambling." We all are, actually. Counseling, I mean. The court ordered it, but it's helping. There was a pause as Jake seemed to struggle with what to say next. That night, Jake continued, "You could have really hurt us. We came in there with weapons, threatening you, but you just stopped us, like you were trying to help us rather than hurt us." Tom considered this. Sometimes people make bad choices because they can't see good alternatives. That doesn't make them bad people. Jake nodded, his eyes bright with emotion. "Thank you. Really. I know I don't deserve it, but thank you." After Jake left, Tom continued his work, but he found himself thinking about the young man's words. In the Marines, he had learned to neutralize threats quickly and efficiently, but he had also learned that sometimes the most important victories came not from defeating an enemy, but from helping someone find a better path. The incident had changed something in the neighborhood. Crime rates around the store dropped significantly, not because of increased security, but because word had spread that Patterson's Market was under protection of someone who knew what he was doing. Other potential criminals looked for easier targets. More importantly, the three men who had attempted the robbery had become success stories. Marcus found steady employment and was able to keep his apartment. Jake's mother received the medical care she needed. Tony overcame his gambling addiction and began volunteering at a crisis center 6 months later, on a quiet Tuesday night. Tom was restocking the candy aisle when he heard the familiar chime of the door sensor. He looked up to see Detective Chun entering the store. "Evening, Detective," Tom said. "Coffee's fresh if you want some." Chun smiled. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something. We've been tracking the robbery statistics in this area, and there's been a remarkable decrease in incidents since that night." Tom continued arranging candy bars. "That's good news for the neighborhood." "It's more than just good news, Tom. It's unprecedented. Whatever you did that night, it sent a message. This area has become one of the safest in the city." Tom looked at her thoughtfully. Maybe people just realize there are better ways to solve their problems. Chin nodded. "Maybe, but I wanted you to know that your actions that night did more than just stop a robbery. They helped save this whole neighborhood." As Chin left, Tom reflected on her words. In his military service, he had learned that sometimes the most important battles were won not through force, but through showing people that there was another way. That night in the store, he had chosen to see 3 desperate people rather than 3 criminals. That choice had made all the difference. The story of Tom Sullivan and the night shift robbery became part of the neighborhood's folklore. It was told and retold in barbershops and cafes, at community meetings and school events. But the man at the center of the story continued to work his quiet night shift, helping customers and keeping the store running, content in the knowledge that sometimes the most important victories are the ones that happen in the shadows. Tom never spoke publicly about his military service or the specific skills that had allowed him to handle 3 armed robbers with such ease. But his actions that night had demonstrated a truth that resonated through the community. Sometimes the most ordinary-looking people are capable of the most extraordinary things. And in a world that often seems divided between heroes and villains, Tom Sullivan had shown that the most important choice is often the one that helps someone find their way back to the light. The night shift at Patterson's Market continued, quiet and peaceful, watched over by a man who had learned that sometimes the greatest victory is helping others discover they don't need to be defeated at all.